Welcome, everyone, dear colleagues, and we start our first panel discussion. It's going to be focused on the theme that is quite challenging, but it is a basic where we start cooperation with the communities within Dobre. This is strategic planning and further strategic management, and we will also speak about those mechanisms for measuring efficiency and performance of local governance, PMCI as mentioned, and also there is another important component of Dobre work with communities. It is ensuring citizen participation at all the levels of the governance. There's a strategic management, decision making, transparency, etc. Today, in our discussion, as members of our participants of our discussion, we have Mr. Sehediy, uh, and congratulations on the award. Then Ms. Dyachenko, Merefyanska community, Kharkiv oblast, Lyudmyla Bilokoz, deputy head for regional development and investments of Novoukrainska territorial community, Kirovohradska oblast. Hopefully, Lyudmyla has joined. And we will also be joined by an international expert, Katarzyna Spiewok. She is expert for urban institutional development from Poland, and I will be the moderator of today's discussion. I am Andriy Kawunets, expert for strategic planning, and the partner of Dobre Program, Foundation for Development of Local Democracy. So, today we are going to not only discuss your experience, but we also need to keep in mind, as mentioned by the previous speakers, Dobre program has expanded, and we not only summarize the first three cohorts, 75 territorial communities. I'm sure that the 25 communities of cohort 4 are also listening to us. So I ask you to focus on some practical aspects, achievements, and probably even some failures that you would like to warn the new communities against. So let us start with Petro. Sehediy, so you are leader of your community. So how did it happen for you, the strategic planning process, and how do you use the strategy for your community's development in decision making, in strategic management, and whether it is important for you, significant, and how do you make sure that the decisions that you now make as a leader of the community, as well as your council and the executive unit, whether it is in line with the strategy as developed under Dobre program. Hello, I'm the leader of Sofiivska community, and we started working by developing the strategy back in 2015. The strategy was developed for Sofiivska Rural Council, but when we were selected for cohort 2 of Dobre program, and we amalgamated with one of the communities, we realized that the previous strategy was not in line with the modern challenges. Decentralization made its corrections, there were new demands, and we started developing a new strategy. Development of a strategy that was developed in the framework of Dobre program, it was quite shocking experience and strategy for us. That was an absolutely different approach, and we needed to find out what the community expected, and we focused on 4 key aspects that we needed to take into account. This is water supply for the population, because there is the problem of quality of water, then roads, street lighting, and healthcare. Maybe it is relevant for all the communities. The strategy was developed, and we set up commissions. There were sessions. We visited various settlements. And the strategy that was developed, we developed it for the future. We had the preliminary agreement that 3 more communities will amalgamate with us, and we included that into the strategy. And currently, after last year's amalgamation, we have the strategy that takes into account those communities that were not yet part of our community when we developed the strategy. Speaking about the strategy, well, we started the work step by step. We started with those activities that needed to be implemented, but in the process of implementing the strategy, we could see that there were quite a lot of new challenges that we didn't encounter before. and that were also supposed to be included into the strategy. And it appeared because quite a lot of, well, we can see that currently the reforms that are being implemented in the administrative structure, well, there a lot of buildings and facilities have been passed over. And when the previous strategy was developed, we only superficially took that into account. But now all the facilities of Sofiivska village, which used to be the district center, so now all the infrastructure has been passed over to the Hromada, to the council. We have 29 villages, 2 settlements, and of course we have a wider mandate. It's good that when developing the strategy, I managed to understand my team and everybody's attitude to the work, because discussion of the issues and I could see the activities of my team. And now we work as a single team, as a single body that is aimed to, that is focused on improving the life in our settlement. And this is really how it pays back, because I'm inspired, we are inspired not to stop, but to further improve. And we are in touch with the 3 communities that are in cohort 4. We are in touch with them, we share our achievements, and of course we give them, we help them to focus more on development of the strategy in view of some aspects that we did not take into account. What we did not take into account, you know that when you develop a strategy, everybody wants lighting, good roads, etc. But speaking about the budget, during these years that we've been working on the strategy, we have implemented 80% of all the undertakings in the budgetary area. We built a good school, we created a high-capacity community, and now the school that we have, maybe it is among top 10 best schools in Ukraine, because we repaired, refurbished it with funding from the oblast budget and co-financed by the local budget. In the district center, we refurbished 3 kindergartens with funds of the credit loan program. And we worked a lot with Dobro program to expand the work of the utilities and to improve the infrastructure. But the greatest problem now is jobs, employment. Unfortunately, with the reform, where there is no regional or district council, we see that individual income tax that we used to receive, now it's not going into our budget. And now we focus on, as mentioned by Mr. Nigoda, it's important that we have investments, that we create jobs in our community, because unfortunately, people, if they don't have jobs, they just leave our communities. We are in Kryvyi Rih Dnipropetrovsk highway. It's a good road, 30 kilometers to Kryvyi Rih. Everybody goes to work there. And of course, we lose these active people, those who could develop our community further. So I would like to once again say that now we focus more on attracting investors. We've allocated land plots that are attractive for investments. We have a contract for construction of 16 hectares for building a power plant. Another one, this is where we want to do comprehensive agricultural to build agricultural complex. We have an investor, we have a prior agreement for that land plot. And of course, we would like the joint utilities to engage more. So after the land, agricultural land was passed over to us, and we agree that mostly it is about actual forest and pastures, but this is also where we need to work, and we need to expand these activities, because it is important to control the deforestation. Another aspect is creating our utilities. We want to set up 4 utilities, and currently we have 1 utility that deals with waste management, water supply, sewage, construction. We plan to have set up another construction and forestry, and also we would like to have a greenhouse enterprise. So when we discuss the strategy that we developed, I believe that without a strategy, well, this is just as you don't plan your day tomorrow. And then you may see that last year in the strategy you planned to do something and you didn't do that, you ask yourself why. And of course, the important problem is funds. When you have funds, you can implement the strategy. But to have funds, you need to think about where you earn that. So I'm very happy that my team supports these endeavors. We have 4 districts where last year we repaired the premises for the Center for Administrative Services, and we believe that somewhere later this month we will open it and launch it, commission. So we are moving forward. The strategy is a great support for us. And let me mention that the strategy and development of the strategy, as supported by Dobre program, really changed the mindset, my mindset as a manager, because I've never thought about how community sees me as the manager. Whether everybody is happy with what I do,
Як вони відносяться, як вони реагують, таке інше. І коли
what's their attitude, how they respond. When we discussed all of these issues, and then they showed me the feedback, I was surprised, because somewhere where I thought I was doing the right thing, but people had a different opinion. So it's important to develop a strategy for every community. And I believe that one needs to be very responsible there, very transparent, and then it will be efficient. Thank you. Could you also tell us, well, you've mentioned a lot of interesting details about strategic planning process, but what about the strategic management? Because you were in cohort 2, you have the experience of monitoring, evaluation, update of the strategy. How does that happen, and to what extent the strategy has become a day-to-day instrument to adopt decisions on the routine basis? So what about strategic management process, and how important is that? Well, the management of the processes, you know that all discussions for allocation of funds is discussed by the Budget Commission then at the session, and if some of the councillors, as well as in Verkhovna Rada, all have their own interests, so then we go back to the strategy, and then we say, well, we will consider your needs later, because according to the strategy, we have to do this. So if we have some extra funds, we will take into account your wishes and your needs. However, the strategy, as I mentioned already, that one of our issues was to organize centralized water supply for the settlements. And when we wanted to supply water for the first settlement, then we organized a meeting, and nobody believed that we wanted to organize water supply, because they said, you are going to steal something from us, you are going to steal land or whatever. And we had more than 5 public meetings, and only at the last one, when we came and when we said, let's do something, either we start doing that or not, and that will be funded by the settlement council, or we stop doing that. You know, women stepped forward and they said, we need water. And we started doing that. And currently, over these 4 years, we've built about 100 kilometers of the network of the infrastructure. We repaired obsolete networks from collective farms. So we repaired those and we built new ones. So, I mean, for the strategy to be implemented, it is really important that people believe you, and people are the greatest value. If people trust you, if they believe that the leader says that and the team says that they will do that, they will do that. We succeeded, and I'm happy. And the water-related issue, well, last year we had a meeting in another village where they repaired water supply system. One woman said everything was done as due, and we trust the leadership. So it's important to have trust of your communities. Well, that's important that the strategy makes it possible to make sure that the public approves, the citizens approve of what is planned for the community, and where the residents know for sure what is planned, and they see that it is really implemented. That really makes it possible to ensure due development of the community. And definitely it is much better for leaders in the community, because then you have support from the residents. Thank you. And now, if maybe our participants have further comments, you're welcome. Otherwise, we move on. Petro mentioned that this strategic planning and management process needs to be as transparent as possible, engaging the public, the citizens. And if there is a question to the speaker, now microphone. Oksana Dudnik, Borivska community, Kharkiv oblast. You now mentioned that you have the problem of employment, that people go to Kryvyi Rih and that you are losing personal individual income tax, but you say that you are implementing the development strategy, building water supply. So where do you take funds for that, for implementing the strategy? Thank you for that question. I mentioned actually that we repair a lot of water supply networks that are obsolete, that belong to collective farms. There we do the repair. We replace the sections that are non-functional, or we just remove them. And with these funds, with the pipes that are rotten, we buy plastic pipes. Also, we allocate funds to do the work, and in this way, we repair all the water supply system, the entire water supply system. So currently, we are self-sufficient, and we allocate funds for local development, for support of other budget areas. I wouldn't say that we have enough funds. Nobody has enough. This year, at the beginning of the year, a community joined us, and there are 3 settlements where there is no electricity supply or lighting, because previously Kamyanska and other communities, they do have this, but one of the communities doesn't. And it was nice when we discussed this aspect of allocating funds for lighting, at least in the central streets of the settlement. Somebody said, well, let's take one particular village, and we already have the design, and we plan in July to start the work to organize lighting in the street lighting. And we will also repair their old water supply system. So with the resources that used to be invested some time ago, we just add our funds, and then this way we provide citizens with what they need. For lighting, of course, we allocate funds from the budget to do the work. So, as we can see, well, we always say that there are never enough funds, but if you plan properly, if you know where you spend this money, then you can plan everything properly. Thank you for that question and for your answer. Let's go back to our discussion, to the speakers. As we mentioned, engagement of citizens is one of key principles of Dobre program. It is implemented in all the components, and now I turn to Tetyana Dyachenko. How did you ensure full-fledged citizen participation at all the phases, development of the strategy, decision-making, implementation? How did you test yourself? How did you make sure that the decisions are really in line with needs of various categories of citizens? And we know that in the framework of Dobre program, there are a lot of surveys to assess quality of services, to assess strategic planning. And according to those surveys, we can see that now citizens already have some basic knowledge about that they can participate in decision making and implementation of decisions of local government. So which modalities did you use? Hello, and I'm very glad to be here in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center. Our community has been here many times in this audience. And actually, you're right that activities of any municipality cannot be efficient without extensive support and engagement of the public. That is why our slogan is nothing for people without people. If people participate in decision making, then they become really partners in addressing any problems that exist in the communities at the local level. Today we speak about adoption of the strategy for our Merefyanska territorial community. So how that happened and how we engaged our residents to develop, discuss, and implement the document. We had quite challenging experience. That was a long process until 2018 when the strategy was adopted. Since then, we have been progressing step by step. We had the positive experience of setting up and functioning of 9 condominium. There, we realized that our residents are ready to undertake this responsibility and to provide for their houses. So there, we realized that our community is also quite extended, and we have a large proportion of private sector, 9,000 private houses. So we recalled that there was this old law of Ukraine on self-organization of the public, and we helped our residents to understand that it is local self-organization groups that can be really the engine making sure that citizens are really masters of their land, and it will make it possible to use funds to develop those streets or the houses in the territories. We promoted that idea. We explained what self-organization authority is. Then we did detailed work to work with active citizens, and we found the providers that started promoting some problematic situations in their territories, and they became the activists that helped our community to set up 9 rayon committees and self-organization bodies. So already having that positive experience, we are an active community, so we love participating in various competitions, contests, and one of those stimuli was the fact that we participated in the contest to support a role of communities in local development in Ukraine, and our participation there made it possible for us to develop a program for development of civil society, and that is something that made it possible for us to develop those committees, district committees, to teach our citizens to be active and to really go deep into those situations, into what happens in the territory of the communities. I would also like to mention that probably the most important thing for our community was that we we're in the position to implement all the components of Dobre program. And one of the components that helped us develop our civil society was voice of the community of local government. Our residents learned to analyze the current situation in the community, see problems, forecast prospects for further development to address those problems. Due to that project, we set up several new NGOs and the organizations that were dormant, so to say, they were reactivated. Our residents also learned skills of project activities, developing projects, and with this substantial base or background, we approached development of the key strategic document for development of our community. The working group to develop the strategy included everybody who wished to be there. They were co-authors of that document. We engaged the participants via Rayon self-organization committees and managers of enterprises and institutions, organizations in the territory of our community. We engaged all active members of civil society associations, active youth, and actually all the settlements joined development of the strategy, those that were then members of the amalgamated territorial community. 57 project proposals were submitted to the strategy. The working group picked up 31 projects, and that was reflected in the strategy for development of our community. And we didn't stop there. We didn't limit our citizen engagement there, because we understand that without active civic position of our residents, it would hardly be possible to implement any of the processes in the community. So for our strategic purposes, that is economic development of the communities, improved living standards. In the framework of that, we keep engaging citizens. For example, one of our objectives is developing civic space, and now, based on our library, local library, at the initiative of our youth council motion team, the motion space, civic space was created. And now young people have this space where they can meet, discuss some problems, and plan their further activities. And also in the library, they provide services for the third age university and childcare services. And also we plan to develop the city center for needs of the community. In the statutes of the community, we developed the regulations on civic space in the territorial community and citizen engagement in planning of that space. Let me mention that that regulation is not always found in statutes of large communities, but we have that. And that is something that makes it possible for us if our community wins in Nasha Gramada contest, we will apply that to develop this civic space. We also develop communication in the community in the context of the public business authorities in this triangle. Due to Dobre, we developed the project for the Business Development Center, Serber, which now operates, and we really help our active organizations develop some business projects and promote these projects. By the way, the status of our community that we adopted last year includes all public participation instruments as regulated in the legislation. These are local meetings, local initiatives, public hearing, We also actively use in our community e-petitions, motions, citizen consultations. Citizens participate in advisory authorities and steering committees, and also in decision making on budget distribution based on participatory budget. All of that is reflected in the community statute. Also in the statute, there are separate articles or provisions for planning development of the community. So we speak about for how many years we adopt this strategy, how that's going to be implemented, what's the deadline for implementation of the strategy. We are now working to develop the procedure for development of the strategy because last year we completed the 3-year implementation plan, and this year we start implementing the plan for the next 3 years. And also, all city council and the bodies and the executive committee try to be as transparent as possible. On our council's website, you can see any kind of information that you need. In our community, we have a communication strategy and a plan to implement that. And since we try to be transparent, our citizens start engaging into those discussions and surveys, because you know that now in the situation of the pandemic, public hearings cannot be held. So we organize those discussions online. When we adopted the statute, we had online discussions. We also do sociological surveys on the ongoing basis, and also we survey people for their satisfaction level, if they are happy with the services that are provided. And even when we planned the budget for 2020 via the website, 426 offers were received from the citizens. And of course, not all of them could be implemented, but some of them were taken into account when planning the budget. We have other positive practices to engage citizens. We have a project management school. We have an international relations department and department for investment activities. And our specialists developed cool activity where they visited all territorial units of our community. They explained what project management is and how to develop a project proposal. And now, due to this project, our citizens write this project applications not only for participatory budget, but for the oblast contest Razov Maybutnye and for the other projects that can be implemented by our citizens in their territories. Besides, another positive practice was lessons with the mayor, where we invited senior school students to the town hall. We explained how the town hall works. Then our experts visited schools, and that was World Cafe or various games. There we explained it to school children how to develop communities and how they can engage in that process. And we have something to be proud of. We have a great youth council. In 2020, they were recognized by the Ministry of Regional Development. Our young people are really active and we very much rely on them. So to summarize now, sure, it is important to engage the citizens not only for discussion of some important strategic documents, it is even more important to engage them in implementation of all the ideas as indicated in the strategic documents, to develop their territories, to improve their territories. And that's true that when people engage to organizing a playground, to invest there, sure, they will also be more caring when using that playground, for example. They will paint it timely. It's not that the authorities do something for the citizens and citizens come and just destroy everything. That's not about cooperation. So only due to this synergy, where authorities, communities come together, where the authorities here, residents and residents here, the authorities, only with this synergy, it is possible to achieve positive results. And we are grateful to Dobre program because, as colleagues mentioned, they really changed our mindset. A lot of communities only join the projects where they can receive something tangible. However, Dobre program really changed our mindset, and now it works for the best, for the benefit of our community. Thank you. Thank you. And that was a very detailed presentation. On my side, I would like to know two important aspects, and I would like to thank you that you mentioned that. First, it is local self-organization of the population, because unfortunately there are very few communities who go there. We remember that recently there were a lot of conflicts in the process of developing the starosta districts. There were rallies and protests, but a lot of communities forget that in settlements there are activists, and it doesn't mean that activists need to be starostas, because there are these self-organization authorities that have extensive mandate. They can do almost everything that a starosta can do, and they can influence what's going to happen. And thank you for mentioning that. And if I may add, we understand that no matter how active a resident is, but if they, without any financial support, they will not have a lot of motivation to work. So in every district committee for self-organization, there is an expert for the territory development. They are officially employed, and they have two assistants to service this territory. This is how we did that. That's an important comment. Thank you. And if I may, could you comment briefly? Well, all the citizen engagement mechanisms, to what extent did they influence the important aspect that we often discuss with the communities when developing this strategy? This is internal integration of communities, because we understand that when the amalgamated territorial communities were created, there were communities where that hasn't happened yet, where the citizens from different settlements do not see that they are from the same community. So whether this extensive engagement and use of various methods to engage the public, whether it made it possible to already speak about that your community is increasing internal integration level. Well, sure. I mentioned already that when we developed the important strategic document, that's not only development strategy, but the statute as well, there we engaged all the citizens who had joined. In the new year, 2 more villages joined our community, and now we start working actively in those villages to develop those rayon committees for self-organization of citizens, because we understand that that's where the residents of the village and of the central settlement, this is the bridge, the link that makes it possible for them to have a dialogue. Well, this is something that we have already. However, those villages that have joined us, they are more or less in the same community. I mean, even before that, we didn't have this much separation where they say that we are from Utkivka and you are from Merefa. No, we are very close to each other and to the central settlement, so we didn't have that separation. Okay, thank you, colleagues. And now we can proceed with our discussion. I would like to pass the floor to Lyudmyla Bilokoz. She is Deputy Head for Regional Development and Investments of Novoukrainska, Kirovohradska oblast. She's online. Welcome. So today we've discussed that it's important to not only plan but also to implement the strategy that we've developed And actually, aspects of implementation of any solutions in activities of local government must have some measurable indicators. We speak a lot about measuring capacity level in various aspects, budget, strategic planning. So your community now has quite good PMCI indicators. In 2017, you had 39 points, but in 2020 it was 81. It is almost 2 times improvement of your PMCI level. How did you manage? And whether it is important to measure the process for achievement of strategic goals. What are the tools that your community uses, and maybe some practical recommendations? What should be taken into account to not only have an adequate PMCI, but also to just increase efficiency of local governments? Welcome. And you know, today it is such an outstanding milestone event for all the communities, for years of efficient joint work. And since Dobre program is about capacity and efficiency of communities, I would like to start my presentation with a fable where a boatman took a traveler to the other side, and on the way, the traveler said that he had never saw such a beautiful boat, but then he could see the oars, and on the one it said plan, on the other one it said do. And the traveler said, well, you have a great boat, but why these inscriptions on the oars? And the boatman said, look, if I plan something, if I think about something, and if I only use one oar, I will stay at the same place, but I will not move anywhere. It also happened that I would start doing something, but I would do that without planning. I would invest a lot of time and effort for that, but I didn't move anywhere. So I made this inscription on my oars to remember that with every movement of the left oar, I need to move the right oar. And then he pointed a beautiful house and the green land plot, and he said, I built this house when I made these inscriptions on the oars. So in our community, we try to both plan and do. And whether we succeed to do that, to row in synchronicity, and the impact on our citizens of these activities, well, to see that, we use this measurement tool in the framework of Dobre program. We got it, and it is really a very important present. This is the index for capacity, community capacity. We have the strategy, development strategy till 2027. When we developed it, we engaged residents of all the settlements in the community. We developed it together with Dobre experts. And if strategies for community development sets clear objectives that we want to achieve, activities, problematic issues, needs of our citizens, activists, business persons, different age groups. So PMCI, it is really a strategic document that contains practical steps, mechanisms, instruments to achieve the development strategy for the community and its goals. Can you launch your presentation now, because we don't see your presentation? You need to share the page where you have your presentation opened. Now we see it. So I will share the story that we like sharing, how we started implementing this index, PMCI index, and how that happened there. We often compare it with seasons because initially it was difficult to perceive that because we realized we were in the program, in the project, we have to comply with terms and conditions of the program, but that was seen rather as a burden. We could not delegate it inside because we didn't have this experience of delegating the powers, so that it were easier to do that as a team. And we are grateful to experts of Dobra program who supported us there. And further on, so during the first year, the experts did this job and they explained it how to implement PMCI, and then together with us in spring, so to say, we worked together, we engaged, we learned to do that. Year 3, since we implemented that for 4 years, so on this third year, the experts let us do that ourselves. They just followed us up whether we will be able to use that and how we are going to use that. And in year 4, when we did a capacity assessment evaluation on our own, there we realized that this tool is so important and convenient for implementation that it can really transform the activities, local governments, and orientations in the community. And we could see, I will tell you later, how we started using the results. Though for those communities in cohort 4, or the communities that are not within Dobra program, but those that are going to implement this instrument there, I would recommend you to go through this 2 or 3 years and not to stop using, not to reject this instrument before they see the first results of it. That's important. What we planned, measured, and assessed within Dobra and within PMCI index, actually, we tried to cover it all the areas of activities. This is leadership and management. For example, we developed it for better understanding of human resources, economic resources of the community. We developed the passport of the community, gender profile of the community. In the framework of Dobra program, we already complete developing the education development strategy. We have the economic profile of the community. All of these documents, well, now, after we have had 2 or 3 years of updating, amending the document, now it works for the benefit of the community. Finance management, budgeting, we do that on the annual basis. Public hearing, offers, proposals from the residents for the next year. We develop gender-sensitive budgeting, provision of services. It is the area that we focus most in our activities in the framework of Dobra program and PMCI. There it was determined that we have problem of managing solid domestic waste. We implemented the project to implement services for sorting and managing sorted waste in all multi-apartment buildings of the community inclusive resource center, setting the elevators in secondary schools so that children with the motion problems with their peers could visit schools. So there was also the discussion of that we need to develop civic space. We have the Institute of Youth, Mother Center, open spaces. A lot of mechanisms have been implemented for transparent and open activities. And on the annual basis, when we do monitoring and evaluation, we realize that in the framework of all of these activities, the result would be that every year there is a higher level of engagement of citizens for decision making. And we see that the confidence, trust indicators are also going up. And we believe it's important for local governments. Now, how we use that? After 4 years of using PMCI index, we learned to use outcomes of the work to facilitate these processes. And the criteria now, this is the index based on which we do the assessment. We not only do the assessment to see what we've done, where we are, so we assess where we are, whether we are moving forward, whether we are using the two oars, or maybe somewhere it is just one oar, where we want to be. We assess that all. And also, we use those indicators for decision making because it really helps us see what we need to do. And the new communities, I always recommend it to them to use the index because it is something that clearly indicates what you need to do. You need to develop the strategy, you need to plan the services, how to revise them, who needs to be engaged, how many times you need to review that. That is a clear guide for the communities. And most importantly, we are always surprised when we think about that, well, all of that can be included in just one document. Implementing the mechanisms, I mentioned that in the criteria it is reflected which mechanisms we are supposed to implement. Public consultations, for example. If we plan budget for the next year, you can clearly see whether we use the mechanism to analyze the offers of the citizens, whether it was transparent, evaluation and analysis, and the criteria of the opportunities. We see where we are. If we have 3 points for certain indicator, we assess what we can do in order to gain capacity. Then the rationale, the index, there we try to develop the rationale not in a brief way, but to really ground it on analysis. Over the 4 years, for each area, for each criterion, as indicated in the previous slide, has been developed. And this is about analysis and how we use it. It's not only about annual assessment, but that's also about motivation letters. Very often communities write motivation letters for programs, for projects. We wrote to Dobre why we want to be there. So I very much recommend using that. Our department structures use that. For example, recently there was a contest where communities applied for the program to have expert assistance to develop the strategy for economic development. So it was fully taken from that rationale, and some information was added. It is revised on the annual basis, but for motivational letters, that's very important. Drafts for letters, annotations. If we develop a project, a draft, take waste, for example. So, of course, here we can see the clear problem, clear opportunities, and the steps that need to be made. We also use that as information for communication with the citizens, to not only give them information about what we planned and what we did, but also to offer this analysis, how we did that, why we did that. PMCI also covers opportunities. When we assess ourselves, we see where we can go, and we use those opportunities as ideas for projects. Speaking about that contest, when we did the survey, when we analyzed which ideas we need to focus on, we checked the indicators. So mostly we had the assessment 4 and 5, but for solid waste, we realized that it was our weakness. So we decided to focus on it in the framework of the project. So this is how we use it to develop the projects. And of course, we see the activities for strategies, plans, and programs. We understand that we need to add something to the strategy, to the plan program for structural units. And documents, they are information resource of the community. In this chapter, you have absolutely all information base. I am sorry, but you have like 2 more minutes of time. Okay, the roadmap based on the results, and the monitoring to check the clock, and this is important for teamwork, of course. And just to finalize, PMCI definitely brings communities together, but we believe that there must be 3 key components. First, the community leader needs to motivate the community to implement this document, because it is not an easy thing, but it is very helpful. So this is about teamwork, team document. And there you can hear voice of the community, no matter where it is located, no matter what the age or the gender of the people, because PMCI has all those mechanisms that determines all these needs and problems. Thank you, Lyudmyla. Could you briefly answer this question, please? Often when we work with communities and we speak about implementing mechanisms of internal audit, PMCI, some objective indicators for activities of authorities and structural units, very often communities are afraid to implement these methods, because we understand that it is historically so that people say that they work for many years together, and they are afraid to implement objective assessment for their employees. So could you comment on that, if PMCI is of use and if it is scary? Well, first, it is a challenge, as I mentioned, because it is about additional burden, about additional document. However, after like 2 years of implementation, you will see how it starts working for the benefit of the community. Because this is where you can clearly see which resources we can engage. Due to PMCI, we can be attractive for investors. Also, it is now time when you need to be realistic, assessing the community and your own activities. And the best way to do that is based on that kind of seasonal approach, as I mentioned, seasons approach. So you need to do that, and then you will see the results. And I'm sure that every community will see how efficient that is. Because an important component of PMCI is also raising professional level of the team, which is so important for community development. Thank you for this detailed answer. I see there are questions about your presentation, and you can ask questions online. And later, you will also receive this presentation. So if you want to have a more detailed look at the presentations, Lyudmyla will send it to you, and I am sure that you need to revisit this material. Thank you. And now we proceed with international experience and our Polish partners. We know that very often we use the experience of Poland implementing the reforms, decentralization, development of high-capacity communities. And I pass the floor to Katarzyna Spiewok. She is expert for institutional development of cities, and she is going to join us online. So it is important now for us to hear how to use the indicators for performance of local governance in the process of strategic management, what that measuring offers, and maybe you will share some of the best practices based on experience of Polish local authorities. Welcome. Can you hear me well? I wanted to make sure that you hear me. Can you see my presentation now? So you see the presentation? Do you see the presentation? Unfortunately, I don't know why, but I don't hear you. So, Katarzyna, you can continue. We hear you. I hope that you can hear me.
Przepraszam bardzo, musiałam na chwilkę do Państwa wrócić, żeby upewnić się, czy wszystko jest w porządku ze słyszalnością, bo
So, if everything is okay, if you can hear me,
zupełnie nie słyszę nic od Państwa.
because unfortunately I don't hear anything at all. Okay, now I can hear you, and thank you.
Przyjmuję, to wyłączam tłumaczenie i już będę mówić.
Okay, I understand that I need to switch off the interpretation so that I don't hear it and then you hear me well. Sorry for this technical delay. And now I would like to answer your question. First of all, I would like to express gratitude for your inviting me for this conference, because during the recent 20 years, I've been working with this challenging issue that you are now facing. For more than 20 years, I've been working in self-governance of Gliwice city in the Lower Silesia. I planned and implemented the system to manage the region. Now, answering your question, what specifically are the benefits of strategic management, monitoring and evaluation? What are the benefits of those measurement systems and mechanisms? I have heard a lot of comments from the colleagues today, and the people have greatly explained the key aspects of that process. And if I were to speak in just one sentence, I believe that that is about significance of the words, actions, and documents, and to implement the capacity documents. So I'd like to start with this aspect, because I believe that it is something that is really important, most important, from the perspective of strategic development of cities. In our Polish governments, local governments, well, they had this problem where everything was done often in order to just put it aside, and they only would revisit it where they needed to find funds to implement some activities. However, this is not what we aspire to. Our task is planning the future and focusing on the most important things and most efficiently implement these objectives. And this is why we need this monitoring and evaluation mechanisms at all the three levels. We need to realize how it works, and we need to attribute words to vocalize that. What's economic change? When social success happens? When do I realize that I've changed my environment for the better? So that all of us could speak the same language. For that end, we need to decide what success is, and we need to indicate to have the indicators for monitoring of actions, results, outputs, and outcomes. And this is about significance of words. Another important aspect that I would also like to emphasize is about priorities. In the city of Gliwice, we managed simultaneously more than 300 processes, day to day, 300 processes. And if the leader had to make a decision, he or she is supposed to have quick access to all the processes. However, based on our experience, strategic management is supposed to focus on the most important processes, most important from the point of view of from the perspective of development. And this is what we define when we define the indicators for impact, outcome, and output. The most important ones for the citizens, because you focus on the citizens. This is about needs of the residents. We are residents ourselves, and we remember that. Besides, what's most important is to define the priorities from the point of view of people who we work with, those who, the priorities and that actually turn all of those documents into actual work. So at every position, an official of local government needs to know what his or her part of contribution is. And this is most important from the point of view of strategic management. And there we need to define those 20% that will ensure that we have the most important result. 20%, this is strategic management, and this is the task where we are supposed to have enough funds for. We measure that in order to know where we focus, where we allocate our resources so that people knew which topics are the most important ones. Another question is about what specifically we gain. What is the specific benefit of this measurement? Above all, that's about communication. This is about the mutual understanding of the leader, employees, and residents. As a result, we ensure transparency. And this mentioned too, and I would like to answer this previous question. What should be done where people are afraid, where they are afraid that these indicators will be somehow damaging? So the first participant of our today's panel discussion said that trust is most important thing. But how to develop this trust? It is important to show that at every step we assess results and processes. We do not evaluate people. We evaluate how we are approaching the objective and what we expect from people, from individuals. It is that they adequately use this mechanism. And now I'm going to proceed with presentation of several good example best practices from Poland of how to develop the monitoring system, and most importantly, what I would like to suggest to you, and I understand that my time is running quick, but I would like to suggest some information about how to build joint teams at the level of several settlements to do the monitoring. So what's most important for us? It is that we try to look as far as possible in the future from the point of view of strategic management. So there, the most important support for self-government, for local government, is provided by the Union of Polish Cities that developed the system for monitoring local development, the system of indicators and the social, economic level and the environment level, and then based on available statistical information, and as indicated which concrete indicators are available for assessment, evaluation of development of cities. And with its support, we can not only evaluate the changes that happen year to year in our institution, but also what happens in our community. And we are also in the position to compare the situation in our community with situations in other communities. And this system would never have been developed without adequate cooperation. The largest association of Polish cities and the cooperation with the government, statistical, tax information. So this is what the indicators rely on. So here I show you the links where you can see examples of these indicators, how to assess that. The next example, as you can see, this is also one of the leaders. This is the Union of Polish Cities. They implement that together with the main statistical office. And here we go to the lower level. And here we see results of cooperation of local government and the national government. And here you can see very specifically what is measured and how. Most importantly, and based on these indicators, the main statistical department works very efficiently, and they have this system to collect this data in order that, to the extent possible, they could use that and so that the monitoring were as efficient as possible. And the third example that I would like to show to you, it is something, this is about that you need to think about this monitoring system already now. This is benchmarking project, benchmarking different organizations. This is what now they are implementing in Silesia Union for gminas and powiats with participation of 35 communities. That was an initiative of the communities. It was initiated by Gliwice. And then the Union of Cities also used this opportunity. This project also has added value. So the communities that decided to work in the framework of this project, and they determine their own indicators, then they compare, benchmark the results, and based on those results, they look for the best experience because it is about improving the work of their community, relying on the experience of other communities. Another experience that I would also like to show to you, this is Gdańsk. Gdańsk, since 2006, has been implementing a well-developed system to monitor all the strategic goals. And most importantly, an important aspect is made on that this system makes it possible to manage transparency, as you mentioned. All the information about the progress of the activities in a very accessible, understandable form is provided for the residents. Nothing for residents without residents. And the last topic that I wanted to touch is integration of strategic management. This is something that could be most useful. This is about developing a system of indicators, a system for monitoring and evaluation. This is integration of the management system. I also visited Kyiv for a similar conference in 2007, and then the management system in my city in Gliwice was like this, as you can see on the slide. The quality management system, the strategic management system was separate, so it was fragmented. 10 years have passed, and then the system became very integrated. Almost all elements of management, starting with regulations of the organizations, multi-year financial plans, budget of activity, strategic documents, all of that is the same kind of organism, same system. And the system makes it possible for us on the annual basis to conduct comprehensive review and answer the question whether we approach our objectives or not, and also whether the context has changed and whether we should probably revise what we're doing. I realize that my time is over, and I will try to now come back and I will answer your questions. Thank you for this presentation. And it is obvious that development of Polish local government, local governance was very active. And thank you for your readiness to support us that we always have from our Polish colleagues, from local governments, from the associations. And we have just a couple of minutes for questions. If anyone would like to ask questions in the audience, please do. And please mention who this question goes to. Thank you. Thank you, Katarzyna. As we agreed This presentation will be made available for the participants so that they could look through the information again. On each slide, you see the link to the page with the data source. You can really consult this sources, a lot of information there, and you can efficiently use this information for our local governments. Okay, colleagues, it seems that we've almost fit into the time slot. In the chat box, I see several specialized questions to the participants, to Petro. For example, you mentioned in your presentation that you follow your track. You see the situation that your residents work outside of your community. And Natalia Otenko asks this question: if people are the most valuable resource, whether we need to monitor why they work outside of the community. It's important to know who they work as, their profession, their jobs, and why they cannot do that in the community. Well, we analyzed that, and it's a pity that some specialists who we would like to work in our community, budget, education, healthcare, that they moved, they changed their place of work, and unfortunately now they work abroad or in large cities. And that is sure because in competitive salary, for example, for healthcare professionals, all of us know the approaches of the public health of the health care center in the healthcare sector. So all the doctors, sure, they are concerned about providing for them. And we had a young doctor, X-ray specialist, and we allocated an apartment for him. And now he went back to Ternopil, and I know that they plan to go to Poland to work there. We have a lot of employees or workers who go to Kryvyi Rih city. These are teachers, but they act as managers in points of sale, etc. As I mentioned in my presentation, one of the greatest problems for our community is lack of sufficient number of jobs. So that is really one of the major problems for us now. And now we monitor this issue, and it is nice that some of the people come back after they have worked abroad. They launch their businesses. They want to continue developing in our community. So yes, we are planning that. We plan to create jobs, as I mentioned, to attract investments there, and to retain those people who work in the community. Last year, unfortunately, we lost a large enterprise, Konditerprom, producing biscuits. They just moved to Kryvyi Rih because the facilities were not in line with the current requirements, where you need to limit access of people to production, and we lost about 3 million hryvnias of the local budget. Okay, let's summarize them. Thank you. So let me remind you that in the framework of this panel discussion, we tried to discuss strategic planning and strategic management. We tried to discuss how to engage residents to all the decision-making steps for planning, for implementing the strategy. And we mentioned that it is important to implement specific measurable capacity indicators for efficiency of decision-making and budget transparency. I'm grateful to the speakers online and offline for very interesting presentations. I wish you all and representatives of the first 3 cohorts of Dobra program who now deal with strategic management, and cohort 4 who start their strategic planning. I wish you that on the annual basis, not only PMCI, but also your living standards increased. Let other communities track why people leave them and come to you to work there. Thank you for your participation. Thank you. And the next panel starts at 12:30. And now we invite Brian K. Dnipro, Yulia, Petro, Sehediy for the press conference.